Welcome everybody to this episode of Sustainable Stace. We're talking about backyard water features and ponds. I'm going to show you how we did ours and I'm going to inspire you to try to make one of your own. Here we go.
I'm Stace. For me, healthy food and sustainability are totally connected. You can grow it yourself. Nature is generous.
There is nothing that gives a greater sense of well-being and calm than slowly moving water in your own backyard. Even while I was filming this morning, there were swallows dipping down and drinking water off the surface of our pond. Earlier in the week, yesterday I think it was, there were herons that stand over 1 meter tall here beside the pond fishing for bullfrogs. We created this little water feature in our backyard and it's been an amazing life-giving experience where our family gathers around, where we swim in summer, where we play hockey in the winter, and we always have this beautiful sound of water moving through our backyard. It's in our lives. I just want to show you many of the little tips and tricks that I uncovered as I was working on building our own pond and get you hopefully so excited about it that you'll just want to find a way to scale it to your own backyard as well. Let's walk through it and I'll show you a little bit of what's taken place. Our original reason for building a pond in our backyard was not that we wanted a pond. It was actually that we wanted to create a flat surface for our kids to play sports in our backyard. All of our property was sloping, we had no flat surface, and I looked at the cost of trucking in soil and it was so expensive, I realized it was going to be less expensive to get an excavator to come in to dig a pond, and in the process we would create the soil we needed to get a flat playing surface. So it was a 2-for-1 deal. We were creating a pond for less money than we were creating a flat playing surface as well. Obviously flat space is more usable, that's wonderful, and we got a water feature in the process. I'm trying to show you the ponds from every different perspectives that you can take in the concept of a small pond, a creek that flows out of it, down into the larger pond. This is the view from our home. The small pond is in the foreground. It's grown in with lots of flowers and plants and bulrushes. The creek comes out of it and then it drops in a little waterfall to the larger pond below. So that's kind of our backyard view of the two ponds and the creek that connects them. I think time and again what blows me away the most about the pond is all the different life that's formed and come here to visit. Seeing a family of raccoons come down to drink, or frogs hopping in and out while herons fish for them, even while our dog will hop in and swim with kids during the excitement of a birthday party in the pond. We've got all sorts of different river plants and water plants that have grown in. There's all sorts of grasses and flowers. There's even a wild willow tree that's taken root here that's growing beside the pond, and there's rushes that have come from the rushes in a smaller pond up above. I can see here on the pond, I'll bring this to you, the casing of a dragonfly that will have just hatched in the last day. Take a look at that. It's all the casing or shell that was around a dragonfly baby that hatched. It's incredible. Oh, and then there's a few other little visitors as well. Look at Murphy, he's just walking by. Hi Murphy, yeah. He was my 1,000th subscriber special guest, if you remember my little kitten on my 1,000th subscriber. That was about a year ago. So yeah, so much life. I'm going to take you to the far end. I'm going to step in the pond and show you how we formed the rock wall at the back end, because there's a slope coming down our property. I want to show you how we shored up the soil to hold it there. It seems that everywhere I go, Murphy's here. Here's Murphy checking out the waterfall with me here. So I'm at the shallow end of the pond. I'm up to my knees, and we had this bit of a drop because our property is gradually sloping, which is a big plus if you're trying to build a water pond and trying to collect the water from your property running in. And we brought in these big boulders to try to do a bit of a retaining wall. We wanted it to look super natural, so we hand placed all the boulders in a wall, and then before we backfilled the soil up against it, which would cause force and push it, and we purposely leaned it backward a little bit so that direction would be going back and away from the water's edge. We found a product that comes in a spray can, and it's called a waterfall spray foam, and you can see it in between the cracks of the rocks, and it's kind of like aerosol mortar. It's waterproof, it's supposed to be non-toxic, and it binds together the rocks, expands a little bit after you spray it, and then as it dries, it actually glues the rocks together. This wall has been in place for I think 6 years now. We've never had to repair it or rebuild it. We've had no rocks fall out of it. So we entirely built that structure out of free placing rocks, shoring up the soil, and then spraying waterfall foam in between all of that. So that's a beautiful way to build the structure, and I'll just turn the camera around a little bit to this side so you can see how we did an entry and an access point to the pond on a few different sides. We struggled at first with knowing how to create an access point to the pond, so we basically carved out some steps out of the soil, and then we put concrete flat tiles down and spray foamed little bits of rock there in that part between them. And then I'll just pivot this around so you can just see at the water's edge, we just kind of did a river rock boulder type of landscape, and those all have a bit of spray foam holding them together. It's pretty incredible to have a place like this to sit and read, sit and think, sit and play. Watch your kids doing cannonballs into the pond. So the waterfall is just here on my left. We created a few steps here as well with the spray foam and the river rock, and that became a really beautiful way for the kids to get in and out of the pond and to play. And when they're cold or they're wanting a rest, they just lie down on the stones or lie down in the grass and take a break. It's a beautiful way to get in and out of the pond by creating your own kind of steps in the soil, putting some concrete blocks down and spray foaming them in place. And adding the rocks adds a lot of softness and texture to what's going on. All along our little creek that goes between the small pond up toward the house and the big pond that's right in front of me here, we've got little stepping stones across where the pets and the kids cruise across the creek. Obviously just hopping across works as well. We slightly excavated a little bit of a trough or a ditch to create the creek bed and then lined it with these smooth river rocks. And the pond liner was put down connecting the upper pond, and then it was sealed or seamed to this long stretch of pond liner that goes all the way down the creek bed. So no water is lost other than through evaporation as it flows down. So a slight bit of a contour like that. So we've got all sorts of plants growing around it. There's a lot of algae and living things going on here, and definitely on warm days there is some evaporation that goes on. That's a bit over a meter down from the creek here into the pond. Incredible sound. You can hear that 100 feet away in the house where we're living, and so you have this sound of running water all the time going from just the small electric pump that's in the bottom at the deep end of the bigger pump and circulating it up. Actually, my 2-inch PVC flex hose that comes off that electric pump, it's actually buried just slightly under the pond liner, and it travels all the way up. So as the water's running down the creek bed, it's also being forced by the electric pump underneath the pond liner all the way up to the top of the smaller pond. So it's just circulating and looping all the time. This is for the express purpose of showing you the pond liner. Here's a place where we didn't do a neat job of tucking in the pond liner, and this is basically a black plastic, or I'd say a black rubber sheet, and it's called 45 millimeter pond liner. So that's a really good weed barrier, and it's a great way of channeling the water to travel, in this case down the creek bed from the small upper pond to the large lower pond. Pond liner. We had to bring in an excavator, obviously, when we excavated the pond. So at the same time, I had the excavator dig a trench about 2 feet deep, all the way from our home down to the furthest point from our home at the deep end of the pond. And in that trench, I buried a water line and a power line. And along the way, in a few places, I sunk one of these little pressure treated posts with water on one side, power on the other, just so there could be more opportunities for outdoor activities, whether kids are listening to music or running lights or anything like that. And then at the power point here where I've got electricity, I have the submersible pump plugged in, and it's a waterproof cable that goes down to the submersible pump, and then with electrical tape lashed to that power cord, I have some waterproof rope, and the rope is tied to the pump, which is at the bottom of the pond. So if I want to pull the pump up for servicing or reconnecting the hose or anything, and it's been running over 5 years without ever having a problem, I only unplug it when it freezes over for playing hockey in the winter, and then we don't run the pump. We turn it back on when the ice thaws. So this is for just retrieving the pump if I have to. And the pump is about 2 meters from the surface, 2 meters below the surface rather, and it's sitting at the bottom of the deepest part of the pond on a 2 foot by 2 foot concrete block that's about 2 inches thick. So I took this big heavy block, set it in the deepest portion on a flat bottom of the pond, and then set the electric pump on top of that where it has power and a cord to retrieve it from. So that's down in there. So this right here is at the back side of our small pond, farthest possible distance away from the deep end of the big pond. And this is where our 2-inch flexible hose comes up. I've got it just running in the back of a broken ceramic pot, and it flows from there in. So there's the hose. So just a 2-inch hose, it's got a bit of algae growing on it, and the water's always running. You know, this pump is running 3,000 gallons an hour, so that's about 12,000 liters an hour. So it's turning over all of the pond's volume of water, I think 7 or 8 times in a day. So it's always moving, and it's just a little electric pump that's been like rock solid. I think 5-6 years it's worked, with us only turning it off when the pond freezes over in winter and we want to skate on the ice. So that's where it comes to. That's this flexible hose that I've got buried under the pond liner all the way up the creek bed and around here to the back of the pond. And it's pretty safe and solid. Like even if you accidentally punched into it with a shovel or a weed trimmer, it's not going to damage. It's got a very thick, strong wall, and it's flexible enough to bend around corners and over some grade changes as well. So as long as you know where it is, you're safe, and it's pretty rock solid. I can't overstate how peaceful and magnificent it is to spend mornings reading and sipping a tea or a coffee beside this little pond. It's only about 6 meters across, 20 feet or so, basically a circle. We excavated it maybe knee deep. We put the 45 mil pond liner through the bottom, up the sides and around the edges, and then everywhere that you see river rock, and we have a variety of river rock between small size and large size, it's sitting on top of the pond liner. So it's basically a perfect weed-proof mat so that no weeds can grow through. And anywhere there is no pond liner, then obviously life just springs forth and comes out. All the plants that are growing in the small pond behind me, they're growing on top of the pond liner. And so their roots aren't penetrating through. It's just a beautiful little ecosystem with this pond. We've got a little fire pit here. Our house is just a few steps up this way. And the water's coming in the back of the little pond. It's coming out right here beside me. It goes down a slightly downhill little creek, and I'll just show that to you, and then waterfall into the big pond. Surrounding the smaller pond, we've placed some permaculture beds with small trees and flowering bushes and herbs, rhubarb. And then, as I'd mentioned, all these different life and plant forms have come into the pond of their own volition, and one of the most gorgeous is these irises that are here. You can see big pollinators landing on them even right now. All through the smaller pond, we've got numerous plant and animal life forms, and none of which were placed here by us. I would say one of the most beautiful is these pond lilies that are here. This flower will open up through the day to being a full handspan across, and then it kind of closes up overnight. Absolutely gorgeous. We have a few things going for us having a pond in a location like this. Some of them would include, we have heavy rainfall in the winter, so with lots of heavy rain, it's pretty easy if your ground slopes the right way to fill your pond up with rainwater that runs on the surface and runs into the pond. So sloping property, heavy rain, big contribution. I think the other real bonus is how poor the quality of our soil is. It tends to be very heavy clay. And so this big pond does not have a liner holding the water inside it. The clay in the soil is the liner. It's preventing the water leaving the pond. And so we used a backhoe. You can see the images there of a backhoe excavating out our pond when we originally did it. The far end was shallow. We kept it kind of like knee deep to meter deep so that little people could get in and feel safe. I backed up my utility trailer and I shoveled some sand in there just with a pond liner on the bottom so that it wouldn't be scary surface to little feet and little toes going in. It wouldn't feel too squishy. But as soon as the grade changed from the shallow end to the deep end and it slopes down quite sharply, there's no pond liner, there's nothing holding the water in. So with the heavy rains, the sloping soil, and the heavy soil, it kind of keeps all the water in the pond. There is quite a bit of evaporation during hot summer days, and so if you want to let your levels go down, you can, or you got to find a way or an alternative to get water to run in. Now you can see our house in the background, and thank goodness the house is elevation-wise above the pond. When I had to re-roof the house, I also redid all the gutters and all the downspouts because it was a real fixer-upper when we moved in here 10 years ago. And so I connected all my gutters and all my downspouts to go to one central pipe that then runs underground from the house. It's collected all the rainwater and it pushes into the upper pond, and I'll show you where it comes in through a PVC pipe. So all the rains that hit the roof of our house get channeled down one pipe and come into the pond. So every big rain isn't just the surface of the pond collecting water, it's the surface of our house's roof collecting water as well. That's it. That's the little beauty that I referenced. Remember I said how my whole house roof, the gutters, the downspouts collect all the rainwater and they tie into this little PVC pipe, and that's coming under the soil of our backyard. And it's moving right into the pond so that every time it rains, the water's moving from our roof into our pond. So I would strongly encourage you that if you're inspired enough to jump into a pond project of your own, that you find a way to get the water circulating. For very little electricity, you can move a lot of water, and that living, moving water is far much more healthy and enjoyable to listen to than stagnant water that's possibly just breeding mosquitoes in your backyard. So we ran power to our pond so that we could run an electric pump that was sized to fit the pond that we had, so that we're moving 3,000 gallons an hour, which is about 12,000 liters an hour. We got the 45 mil pond liner, the 2-inch flexible PVC hose that connects to the pump in the bottom of the pond, and we were able to piece together the upper pond, which is shallow and small with a liner, to the lower pond, which is big and deep and doesn't have a liner, and a creek that connects the two. And the creek bed, as I noted to you, has the pond liner all the way in it that's basically channeling the water down from the upper pond to the lower pond. That's really all there is to it. There's a lot of trial and error, but it's fun. And then if you can get river rock like I've shown you and use the spray foam to connect all the river rock together, you can get some beautiful features that are very soft and very warm around the edges and even into the water level of your pond. You go for it. Good luck. You can do this. And hey guys, if you've been watching this on YouTube, thank you for coming along for the ride. Please like it and subscribe. See you next time.